Hi, welcome back. So now we have finished the basic HTML that you will require to make a web page. The next thing we are required to do is the intermediate HTML. So let's start. So the tag that you're going to learn about in this part is the form tag. Now we might have various forms on various sites for various purposes, right? As any site is incomplete without a form, you will have a form on most of the websites. So we're just going to see how we can make a simple HTML form. However, making a form do something, submitting the data to somewhere, or actually making some change to the web page when a form is submitted requires backend and JavaScript. So we're not going to see functional forms right now, but what we are going to see is how a form is created, how it is put on your page, right? Because you require inputs and we don't know how to put inputs yet, right? So let's just move. So I have an unsaved data right here. I'll save this. So I've saved this file by the name of forms.html inside my web dev course folder. And so now let's see how it's done. So I'll type the structure from scratch in this one. We have the head, we have the title. So the title will simply be form demo. Now we have the body, and let's just first put an h1 saying my first form. Right. So if I open this up in the browser, so this is what I have till now. So now I want to add a form to my website, right? Let's say my form needs to take a name and a password. A name, we'll add an email and a password. And now I'm going to use a comment. Remember, you can do command plus slash. And this is the kind of place you would use a comment to keep track of what you are doing, because as you'll see, a very small part of the code will actually tell you what the input is about. So by writing the three things above here, we can keep track of our form better, right? So to make a form, the first thing you do is you add a form tag. And now by default in VS Code, you'll get this action. And in some compilers, you might get method. So these are the two things that are responsible for the submitting of form. These are the two attributes that you will set according to your requirement of where the form needs to go or where the data needs to go. And you don't know how to do this right now because method would require you to put the type of HTTP request, action would require you to put the domain to which you're submitting, and you don't know any of these right now because that is in the backend section. So even though these are one of the most important parts of the form, and no form is complete without them, we are not submitting to anywhere right now. We are just making a structure, and that's why we are going to delete this from our form for now. We'll get back to forms and how you send the data when we start with the backend and we discuss what HTTP requests are, what are their types, and all that stuff. For now, I'll just have the form, and now inside the form, you can simply start giving inputs, right? So if you type input is a tag, right? And if you press enter, it gives you type is equal to text by default. And let's see what that is by refreshing the page. So I see I get this input right here. This is simple input, I can type anything in here, and that's not a problem. So you could add various levels of inputs here. I've just duplicated this line by pressing shift plus alt plus down multiple times. And if I refresh this page, I see I get multiple inputs here. And the first thing I want to see is that if I put something here saying some random stuff after the form, I get that on the next line, even if I give it enough space to come up here. So we see that form is a block level element. However, these inputs are stacked on the same line, and hence input by themselves are inline elements, but form is an block level element. So that's something you could remember, and it'll help you when you get to the styling. So okay, so we need 3 inputs for now, and I'll delete this. Right. So now we could just have something like this. And let me move all of these to separate lines. I'll do that with the br tag now as a div to do this in normal cases, but div, span, and link are the 3 tags which are very important in HTML, but I've not introduced till now because you would understand their use at this point of time. I'll introduce them when we get to the CSS section and you know how styling works, and then we'll put divs out of all of these on all of these inputs instead of br. So for now we can work with br, and we see all of these move to different lines, and I'll just add one more br because it will give us some nice spacing in between. And now if I refresh, I see I have 3 inputs here, right? So the first thing is this type. Now you could have a lot of types for an input, and if we try to get, yeah, so these are all the types you would have. You can see from the suggestions, right? So you can see we have a lot. You will use button, and you can use checkbox, and you will use color. You might use some of them, and let's just see a demo of some of them. Ignore the name, email, and password thing for now. Let's see what happens if I make it color. You can see I get this nice color selector here, and now I can select whichever color I want, right? This is a Max interface. It might be different in Windows, I'm not sure about that, right? Or you might have some other, like number, let's say, and then this should be a number, and you can see the difference because right now I'm trying to type some letters in here, but they're not appearing because they're not numbers. So that's a big plus of HTML, of this tag in HTML, that you can specify the type of input, right? And you do 123, then you get these arrows right here to actually change the input. And you could have some other type. Let's just try one last. Let's see radio. And if I refresh, I see I get a radio button right here. And currently this does not go off, but that we'll see later. So these are the different types you could have, right? So what we need in this one is type is equal to password. Now you might be wondering what the use of type is equal to password is, because in the end we're going to enter normal text here and normal text in this. But let's just see what I get if I enter something like this. I get this encrypted, like the dots which you normally see on websites. So that's something that you can do with just the HTML by giving input of type is equal to password. So that becomes easy. So this is how you would make a simple form, right? This is nothing complex, but later you'd have a lot of attributes known as name and ID or things like that. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So the next thing is input labels, right? We need to know, you must have seen on sites that they give something here, some text here that will tell you what this input is for. So what we could do is we could do name, email, password, and if I refresh, I get this nice form here. However, giving your name, email, and password like this is not something which is considered good practice. And why? Because this has a really good alternative known as a label. So what's a label? Label is just another tag. Label. Ignore this for now, and I give name in here, right? And I still get the same interface. It doesn't change. The UI does not change. I'm still seeing the same thing. So what is the difference between a label and just putting a simple text like this? So for that difference, at first I have to introduce two new attributes. First thing is for, and before you can understand what for is for, I need to introduce this ID. So what is an ID? ID is something that you will use a lot in CSS. So an ID is a simple random text that you can give to any element on your page, right? But ID is unique. So what do I mean by that? If I give an ID by the name of name to this, right? Then I can style this particular input later on by styling ID is equal to name. You will get this when we move to the CSS section. But for now, you can just understand this as ID is a unique identifier for an element on a page. An element may have an ID or may not have an ID, but the one thing that is fixed about an ID is that no two different elements can have the same ID in HTML. If you wanted to give the same styling to two different elements, you would use something known as a class. We'll get to a class in the CSS section. But for now, ID is a unique identifier for a tag or an element on an HTML page. So here we could give an ID is equal to name to this input, right? And now inside the for, we would put name. So the thing that you should do is inside the for, what we have should match the thing that is inside the ID of the input that is associated with this label. What I mean is, we can see that this input here is associated with this label, right? So here the ID of this input should be same as the for of this label. So what this for does is, it tells the HTML that the label we are putting here is for this ID, right? And what's the use? So the use of a label is that it increases the clickable area of an input. So what do I mean by that? Let's just take an example of this one input of email. So if I currently go to this page and click on email, specific email word, the whole text gets selected, and this is not something any user would want, right? So what label does is that if I click on this input to which a label is linked, let's see what will happen. So if I click on name, this particular input gets selected, and this is something you would want, right? And you might not have noticed it in a lot of websites, and you might think that this is not something too big, but it does increase the usability of the site and the user experience without even the user noticing that it is doing something like that. Otherwise, putting it like this will not make a huge difference on the back end too. It won't make any difference. You won't use labels to identify an input on the back end, right? You will get that when we get to the back end. So we're going to do a similar thing for all the other inputs too. I can give a name is equal, ID is equal to email to this one, and I can give an ID is equal to password to this one. And now if I add my label here, so now if I refresh, oh, I'll have to enter the text here too. So now I can see I have this form, and the only thing that's different in this from what we had previously is that it is more friendly to all the people who would potentially use our website. So this is how you would create a basic form, and for the submit, you could either have a button by the type of input type is equal to button submit, right? And if I refresh, I get this button right here. And if I enter anything here right now, notice first thing that you should notice is this and this. I mean, you should see that the page is refreshing, and the second thing, all the data here will go away. So that means that this data is getting submitted to somewhere. I mean, it's not getting submitted to somewhere right now, but that is what you would have an input type is equal to submit for, right? And we would use this a lot on the back end when we make a login form or when we make a submission form for something, right? And if you want to change the text inside of this, you can do a value is equal to and enter, right? And if I refresh, I see I get enter here. And value is the other attribute that you need to remember in a form. So if you wanted to put some random data in here, then you would use value here, right? If I do value is equal to AF, and if I refresh, I see I get AF pre-filled here. Now you might be wondering why we would want some pre-filled data in a form, and the reason behind that would be, like, you could imagine a form for editing something, right? So if you have entered a comment on a page and then you later want to edit that page and you edit that comment, I'm sorry, and if you press edit comment button on the website, then it takes you to a different page. It shows you a form where your existing data is already filled inside the form, right? You don't have to fill everything from scratch again. So that is an example of a place where you would use value, and that's all. And one more last thing that we could see is the placeholder. So you must have seen in a lot of websites that they have like some quite faded out text written here, which is demonstrating what you should enter, and like some sample email in this case. And then as soon as you type something, it vanishes, right? So that is done through a placeholder. So if I enter a placeholder, then I can enter the sample text that I want in my form input. So if I enter abcd @xyz.com, like this could be a sample email, right? And if I refresh, you see I get this abcd@xyz.com written here, and as soon as I enter something, it vanishes away. So that's what a placeholder would do, right? We could give a placeholder here to I don't know, enter password, and if I refresh, I see I get enter password here, and I can remove this value for now. So that is what you would get with the form. I know it does not look good right now, honestly, and I have these BR tags, which is never good practice. So you will get to style this a lot when we get to CSS, and especially to Bootstrap. Bootstrap gives really nice options of styling forms. You don't know what that is right now, so don't worry. But we'll style this much better when we actually get to the CSS section, right? For now, this is how you put a form on a page, and it isn't submitting to anywhere again, right? So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.